Hello and welcome to the Check Out This Record podcast. I'm Frank, and with me is my great friend Mark. This is the show, of course, where we recommend records to each other and then review them. As you saw in our last episodes, we also talk about musical-related things such as concert experiences, and we'll even review the same album if we haven't heard it before. Now, you can find us on Instagram and YouTube, so if you like the show, give us a follow. Mark, how are you, my man?
Another beautiful day in paradise, Frank. I just poured myself a nice tall glass to get through this one. I guess when you say YouTube, people really could have seen what we did last week as opposed to have heard it.
Yeah, well, I've heard people like to listen to the shows on YouTube. I try to put a nice little graphic up there, and it's a way that people are digesting podcasts as well. So why not, right?
Sure. I'm going to keep drinking.
And you're going to keep drinking, my man. So, I guess maybe we'll see how you feel about this episode. And maybe before we even get more aggravated, let's get a little bit aggravated, shall we? So we have the newest inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Let's name them. We have Depeche Mode. We have the Doobie Brothers, Whitney Houston, 9 Inch Nails, the Notorious B.I.G., and the band T-Rex. Mark, your thoughts?
Well, I've been pretty clear in the past about how little this means to me. And this year's inductees are a perfect example of why. The Doobie Brothers and Depeche Mode they're just pop bands, pop groups. I get that they're for somebody. They're not for me. And Whitney Houston did the most important thing ever. She put Kevin Costner in a music video. Which was the only kind of video he hadn't been in yet. T-Rex, 9 Inch Nails, otherwise known as the Nin, and the Notorious B.I.G., Mr. Biggie Smalls.
Yes.
I can get behind them being in a Hall of Fame for being some of the best of what they did.
Right.
T-Rex, honestly, I only know a couple tracks, but all of those tracks rock and rock hard. 9 Inch Nails, they pushed metal and industrial metal into a new era. They really, Trent Reznor with his Single Vision really opened, alternative kids into something darker and something cool. And I don't think that can be overstated. I definitely think he deserves that. And then, what do you say about Biggie that hasn't been said? The dude was literally larger than life and left a hell of a wake in his passing. I'm not a big rap guy, but he's the equivalent of either the Beatles or the Rolling Stones when it comes to 90s rap.
Yeah, totally. You mentioned Trent Reznor and 9 Inch Nails, and whether you like that mesh of metal and industrial, the composition of those alone to me is a feat, and I think that's very hard. As someone who attempts to compose music, I definitely feel that alone is something that's worthy, and I'm okay with him being on there. Same thing with you. I'm not the biggest T-Rex fan. I do know a couple of songs, very riffy on the guitar side, and they do rock. I'm okay with that. Notorious B.I.G., I'm totally okay with him being in there because I kind of feel like what he was doing also, some of the rock guys probably fed off that as probably the inspiration, the passion behind it. He's my favorite rapper, although I'm not the biggest into rap either. But I could totally dig what he did, and I'll still listen to his stuff, and I feel it's not as dated as some might feel, and it definitely holds its own today. The others, Whitney Houston, Doobie Brothers, to me, it's elevator music. There are guitars with the Doobie Brothers, so I guess that fits Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And now Whitney Houston goes into our discussion with, do they need to be subgenres? Because although she contributed to music, what did she really contribute to rock and roll, right?
Yeah. Well, why don't we call it the Pop Rock Hall of Fame?
Thank you.
And just make it so homogenous that nobody really cares. Because nobody cares. It's such a boring, triteful thing. Like,
it is
rock and roll. Call it rock and roll. If it's not, and you want to celebrate these guys, hey man, that's cool. But put it in its own wheelhouse, or just take the wheelhouse we have, put an appropriate name on it, and let's move on so that I can be done talking about these bands that I don't give a shit about.
I agree, because what's going to happen is going to get so layered down, like you said, that it's just really people are going to just stop caring eventually, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm glad we got to talk about it, and of course, be a little bit aggravated.
Yeah, now
But
that my blood pressure's up, what else are we doing?
yeah, well, I'm really excited for this episode because we're going to be reviewing the same album, and that same album is Greta Van Fleet's their debut album, Anthem of a Peaceful Army. Now, the year before, they released an EP called From the Fires, and that gained a lot of attention. But Greta Van Fleet is a band that I think it's safe to say we didn't know about. They're current, they're gaining speed, and they're getting popular, and I think it's going to make for some of interesting discussions. So just let me again, so I can clarify. Prior to me coming to you with this idea, you've never heard of them before, correct?
Correct. I had not heard a damn thing about this, and honestly, spoiler alert, I wish it had stayed that way.
Well, I first found about them through a friend of mine, and of course, let's address the elephant in the room. Greta Van Fleet, they sound like Zeppelin, right? I heard one of their singles from this album on satellite radio, and that was all really I know of them. So let's talk a little bit about exactly who they are. So the band's from Michigan. They're comprised of three brothers, twins Josh and Jake, Kizka, and their brother Sam, along with their family friend Danny, right? Now, these guys are young. I'm talking like early 20s here. I watched a video where they're at the record store buying records, and I noticed their taste in music is definitely old school. So I'm talking Beatles, Neil Young, Dylan, Hendrix, I guess some staples. Your thoughts on like young kids digging that style, making that their foundation? I know our foundation when we were in the band was definitely a little bit different. It was the 90s punk scene and alternative and stuff like that. But your thoughts about kids like this making that their foundation?
I think it's pretty cool. Record collections don't come together overnight. So to see them adding some classics is cool. I would like to stress that no man's record collection is his, every man's record collection is his own. And you don't have to have anything in your collection that doesn't make you happy. So if somebody tells you have to have, Sgt. Pepper, tell them to stuff Sgt. Pepper up their ass because you don't have to have that record if it's not what makes you. And I got to tell you, Frank, I watched this, the video that because you had mentioned it to me. So I went and looked at it. I wanted to see what they were getting into.
Sure.
And then I scrolled down a little bit and I found another video of them with somebody else in a record store where they kind of poked and looked around the record store. I can't help but feel like it's a little bit of a gimmick to give them credibility, to give them, some validity where otherwise people would just ask how some young guys would come up with a sound. I feel like they're trying to justify being themselves.
And do you think that's maybe because of the comparisons to Zeppelin, or because they're maybe kind of passing themselves off as these guys who like this old, I guess now older style of music? You think that's why?
I don't know. It feels a lot like a record label thing to me.
Right.
It feels very 90s. Let's prop these guys up in a record store and show you that they know what cool records are.
Right.
Like I said, it feels a little disingenuous to me. Some of the stuff that they pointed out seemed like, those are great records, and some of it seemed a little. I think I'm spotting you bullshitting, and like I said, it felt a little gimmicky. But again. Hey, if they're being genuine and this is what they're going in and the records they're picking out, more power to them. If it's about building your record collection, right? This podcast is called Check Out This Record. I want people to go to record stores, not because I have friends who own record stores, but because I feel that a record collection is really personal.
Yeah.
And I want people to find records for their collection that make them feel like better people. I think they embrace that concept, that theory a little bit. But again, it also kind of feels a little bit like a marketing strategy to me.
It's interesting you say that too, because I just thought about like other videos I would watch of people in record stores and people with the punk foundation, and what they're getting is like the first Sex Pistols album, the first Clash album, right? The first Ramones album, like Richard Hell and New York Dolls, and you're like, wow, can this be any more cookie cutter, right?
Right. Like they just got like, the maximum rock and roll, must have albums, starter kit, punk rock starter kit, and they're just firing through them, right? Because let's face it, if you really listen to the Sex Pistols, you know that they're garbage.
Yeah.
And you don't need to own those records. I think it's one of those misnomers. So that's what those videos kind of felt like to me a little bit.
Right.
I want to hope that they're being genuine. It just came off a little fake for me.
Yeah, and we always talk about that too, and we've talked about this so many times throughout the years. But it's like, we always say, oh, those are those bands that people tell us we're supposed to like because we like these. But again, we're not. It doesn't make us happy, right? Why? Like, why spend your hard-earned money on these records and stuff like that? That's a very interesting point you brought up. And I sensed that they were humble dudes, and they did seem down to earth. Of course, they're young, right? And they seem to have embraced what has influenced them. However, that elephant in the room, it doesn't get talked about at all. Like, it's something they definitely gloss over. So let's talk about it, right here, right? They sound like Zeppelin. Your thoughts on that heavy influence there?
Yeah, I'm really interested in, if you watch any of the videos, any of the interviews with these guys, they do just that. They go, hey, people ask them what it feels like for Robert Plant to say how cool it is that they sound like them, or say that they have a cool sound. And they go, yeah, that's cool. We're just doing our thing and, whatever. For me, I don't know. It feels a little brought on. I got to ask myself how in 2020, a couple 20-year-olds sound just like Led Zeppelin. Is there a family history of a musician in the family? Is this a family band situation where dad's molding them to sound a certain way? I don't know. I can't place that. This whole band feels forced and faked to me. So the fact that they sound like Led Zeppelin, I think that they realized that was an area that they could probably exploit.
Mm-hmm.
Rock and roll is circular. We're going to hear sound come back in, different patterns and different wavelengths. And it's going to happen that bands sound like other bands. But, as far as embracing that influence, I mean, it's okay. I was really interested to see that their next record is going to sound totally different according to a quick brief. So are they avoiding the backlash, or have they run out of faux Led Zeppelin material?
Right.
I don't know. This album was boring as fuck. So, I hope that they found something better to do.
Well, I mentioned this to you before, and I think you said you might have disagreed, and I could see that too. And I feel just the popularity of rock or guitar driven music, electric guitar driven music is on a downturn. It may not be dead, but I don't think it's on a young kids playlist now as it was in the 80s and the 90s. Now, for whatever reason that is, that's another episode. And you get grumpy people like myself saying, well, these kids just listen to these 2-bit shitbag pop stars all the time. So again, isn't a band like Greta Van Fleet something we want now, and we want that cycle to continue for a new generation? Now, you said yes, there is a cycle, but then the next layer down from that is, well, is the cycle genuine, right? Is it contrived? Has it been brought on? I think kind of that's what you were getting at, right?
Yeah, I'm not on that bus that rock and roll is dying.
Right.
I think again, that circular nature of rock and roll, certain things influencing things. You'll get generations of kids who are like yourself, who are super influenced by Dylan, and then you see that spread, and then you get a gap where those kids weren't influenced by Dylan because they weren't, they were listening to something else when they were young, and then it comes back, and so it's a very circular thing. I think this idea of needing them is kind of bullshit. Because again, I don't think rock and roll is dying. What I think is happening is it's hibernating. It's going underground. It's going to more honest and genuine music. It's the 80s hair metal is gone. True. Because it was disingenuous. The stuff that's really stuck around has been the stuff that's been genuine and from the heart and honest. And right now for rock and roll, that's underground. That's punk bands, metal bands. Whether it's Norwegian metal that's really expressing itself in a very vulgar, over the top kind of extreme way. Or whether it's, a little folk rock band writing songs about killing their lovers, whatever it may be. I think that rock and roll style is still there. The kids are still going to shows. I think the fact that it's not mainstream anymore is okay. Let rap dominate. Let R&B take the radio waves. We're living in the future, dude. People are still listening to heavy metal and rock and roll and all these great things on their own. I don't think we need imitation bands anymore. So if they're trying to sound like Led Zeppelin,
yeah,
they might as well just be another cover band. If they're trying to do something genuine and awesome, I think that's what's going to show in the long run. I think that's what's going to give them longevity. Look at Rancid with one single, two singles, Ruby Soho and
Time Bomb.
And Time Bomb. And, the last two albums were garbage, but, that's a band that with just popping up as a style got popular across the mainstream, and then just continued on its own path of doing exactly what they wanted to do. And they're still very popular. Those guys are by no means going hungry at night.
No.
So, I don't think we need this, man. I think we need rock and roll music to keep burying its head underground and for people to keep chasing it and digging it up to the surface and just seeing what kind of cool shit comes out.
You break up a good point. Just because maybe it's not dominating the airwaves or the record companies and executives aren't pushing that out to the masses, that doesn't mean that it doesn't still exist. It's just you have to then dig for it, which is basically what you were saying. You have to dig for it. It's not popping its head. It's not saying, hey, look at me. On the surface, it's getting called this. Like I remember when Chris Cornell passed away and whatever stupid award show was next. They really didn't have that much in a way of a tribute. And who did they get to talk about it is that Imagine Dragons band, who I guess is now classified as rock on the surface, but they're not really rock. But you're right, though. It's not there on the surface, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist underground. It just maybe takes a little bit more effort, right?
Yeah, and that's what podcasts like this are for.
You got it, man. You got it.
Keep listening, folks.
Keep listening.
Make sure to rate and review. Tell your friends.
Absolutely. Please do. Now, my good friend Don in Nashville, and a shout out to him if he's listening, said that.
Yo, what up, Don?
Don. He said that if Zeppelin doesn't want to be Zeppelin, then nothing wrong with someone else taking the mantle. So he told me about this band Kingdom Come. Mark, are you familiar with them?
Yeah, I know of them, and I went back when you mentioned that to me to really kind of dig back in. I don't think Kingdom Come sounds nearly as Zeppelin as Greta does.
Right.
But to just repeat what I've been saying for the last 5 minutes, you know what? If Zeppelin doesn't want to be the next Zeppelin, that's cool. You can go be yourself. I think if from the point of view you want to be the coolest thing in rock and roll, I'll give you that. I want to be the next Led Zeppelin in that I want to be this crazy rocker dude. I want to have legendary stories about us trashing hotel rooms and, seances and buying Aleister Crowley's house. If that's what you want, I'm super into that. But if it's, I'm just going to ride Zeppelin's wave. Hey, look, dude, there's a bar that's got a great cover band. It doesn't cost anything to get in. Make sure you tip the band. Make sure you tip your bartender and drink good beer. Stop drinking crap. That's my advice to Don.
There you go, man.
And it should be said, I don't actually know Don. So, hi, Don.
And he appreciates the shout out. Trust me.
I'm sure he does.
But these instances do occur. First of all, Zeppelin has had their share of copyright infringement, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, 10 years before Woody Guthrie's "This Land Is Your Land," the Carter family wrote "When the World's on Fire." Outside of the lyrics, it's practically the same song. Now, these are song instances as opposed to an entire band kind of taking on that moniker. But again, I think your thoughts is you're okay with that, right? As long as it comes from a genuine place. There's going to be influences, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I definitely think there's going to be influences, and you're definitely always, you'll hear us do it as we go through albums. Say, man, I could really hear the Foo Fighters in this, or man, I could really hear Elvis Costello in that. It's going to happen. The question is, are we taking that moment of influence and using it to sell something fake that we've just reproduced in that image? Or are we paying tribute to it?
Right.
And I think there's a difference there. And if I remember correctly, there were a number of blues artists back in the late 70s or early 80s that attempted to sue Led Zeppelin over similar strong structure and chords, things of that nature. I would have to do more research on it to find those cases, but it's definitely come up in Led Zeppelin's wheelhouse for sure. And there's a lot of that. Look what I think the guy from The Verve still has to clean Mick Jagger's toilet for whatever they ripped off of that song, The Freshman. Like that guy, I think they bankrupted him pretty heavily over that. So I mean, it's definitely something that happens. I was thinking just as we were getting ready for this and kind of coming up with stuff. Remember when you and I were just young lads, but Oasis came to the U.S.
Yeah.
And all the record magazines, all the music rags were talking about them being the next
Beatles. Yeah,
it was the next British invasion.
Yeah,
and look what happened to them.
Yeah, I mean the brothers don't even speak anymore, so there you go.
Yeah, I mean, and those albums totally suck. So, hey, I had that first one. I certainly tried to wonderwall some girls into making out, whatever that means.
Nice.
But those records just didn't hold up, and I know that there are people that still love them, and for nostalgia purposes, who knows? Maybe you wonderwalled the first time with a girl to it, or you had some Champagne Supernova memories, but. On the whole, those records just aren't that great. They're kind of boring.
Well, it's funny we mentioned T-Rex earlier, and I think there was a song on the first album. It might be that song "Cigarettes and Alcohol," where Noel Gallagher even says, "Well, this is a blatant ripoff of a T-Rex song." So,
yeah, well, and Metallica's been accused of that in a few places of stealing riffs and doing stuff. And you can find interviews where they go, "Hey, man, we really like when." This band did this particular thing and we really like that and we rode with it. And there are occasions where you're going to go, all right, man, that's pretty cool. It's cool. To me, as long as you're owning that, hey, this was influenced by, or I heard this really cool part, and I wanted to try to use it. So we used it like this. I'm more forgiving with that. It's this kind of concept of, oh, we're not really trying to sound like them. That's just what we sound like. I just can't help but call bullshit on that.
Yeah, I mean, think about the first two Springsteen records. I mean, obviously there was heavy comparisons with Dylan, but one person who kind of gets left out on that is Van Morrison. In fact, on the second album, The Wild, the Innocent, the E Street Shuffle, Kitty's Back, there's basically a breakdown in there where he's doing the song Moon Dance from Van Morrison, right? But he's taken that, but it's done in such a even more masterful way, especially with the placement. And then after that, I mean, the subsequent albums, didn't necessarily sound like Van Morrison, but that, that's going to happen. Hey, listen, if I could sit here and write songs like Tom Waits all day, I'll be doing it.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to point out, I like the comparison for Bruce Springsteen to Van Morrison, because I feel like as arrangers, Bruce was a much better arranger than people give him credit for, and he really lines up with that Van Morrison feel. Yeah. And I think the Dylan thing is just because he was good at being wordsy. The boss is boss when it comes to using a lot of words, and I think it's kind of not a false comparison or to say that he was a lot like Dylan. And I get in the time that Dylan was definitely the bigger act. He was the more notable name, and it probably made more sense to compare him. But I think when you look back, to me, Springsteen lines up way better with Van Morrison than he does with Dylan. And I'm sure both Dylan and Van Morrison had to have been huge influences on the boss. Yeah, and the Mighty E Street Band.
Especially those first two albums, for sure. And I know we spoke about this too off the show, and maybe this is a few. Just refresh my memory again. Have you listened to Astral Weeks by Van Morrison?
I don't think I have.
Okay, so that may be one in the future that I might task you with, because I really think you'll dig it. And again, it's just one I am interested in knowing your thoughts on. So yeah, I think that'd be a good album for you down the road too. And real quick too, I know you mentioned the Verve and Freshman. So remember, there was the Verve and then there was the Verve Pipe. Do you remember that?
Yeah, is that what I'm mixing up? Is it the Verve Pipe that's
Yeah, the Verve Pipe is Freshman, and the Verve is Bittersweet Symphony.
Which one stole the song from
I'm gonna say the Verve and Bittersweet Symphony because they're British, right? So it's
Right. Well, that guy is still cleaning Mick Jagger's. He's probably not using a toilet anymore. He's cleaning Mick Jagger's diapers.
Oh, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. So I don't know about you, but I tried not. Well, in all these reviews, I try not to look at other reviews just because I don't want my opinion swayed. But for these guys, there's a lot of heat on them. So I just directed. I just kept getting directed to this one review, and that's from Pitchfork. The review was not it's not merciful. I mean, it was giving it a 1.6 rating. This album, to me, though, I don't know. That should be like preserved for like the really, really vile artists. I'm talking your Nickelback, your James Blunt, most modern pop artists and albums. Ed Sheeran, the person who wrote this, Jeremy Lawson, really was. I mean, he referred to them as stiffed. He mocked the hippie costumes, basically saying their songs could have been written by any classic rock cover band across America. Now, before we get into track by track and then a synopsis, did you think that right there, what I said was a little extreme, or you're kind of like, hey, man, I think that's on par?
No, I think Jeremy nailed it, dude.
Did you really?
Like I said, the costumes and the sound of it, it just feels disingenuous to me, man.
Mm-hmm.
It just... and I got to agree. I'm not sure. I'm guessing this is 1.6 out of 5.
I'm assuming, yeah.
Out of 5. I mean, that's probably close to where it'll land for me at the end of the day. Spoiler alert. Just because, dude, oh my God, this breaker is so fucking boring.
Well, with that said, you want to segue right into the track by track review?
Absolutely, man. You mind if I start?
Yeah, absolutely. So for everyone's pleasure, here we go. The album review, Greta Van Fleet, Anthem of the Peaceful Day. Mark, take it away with the first track, my man.
Okay, so Age of Man.
Uh-huh.
Oh, what a terrible way to start a record. I get we're setting a tone here,
yeah.
right? But the next 3 songs are just like the polar other end of what it is, the tone we're setting in this first track. And really, the next 3 songs are the best this album gets. I just feel like, they took this from the back half of the record, threw it up front to try to break up the fact that the back half of this record is an adult contemporary snooze fest. What do you think?
Well, I for some reason when I sit and look at get ready to listen to an album, I look at the cover, and to me the cover, the imagery of that cover kind of sets a visual tone. So I looked at the album cover. To me, it's cosmic. It's open and airy, and that kind of set the tone musically with this song. So again, I keep going back to that term, but it was very, very cosmic for me. It's a classic rock sound. I think what the intent was to show off that these guys can play. Because I mean, to me, the guitar work was good. I mean, I can't play like that, and these kids are, maybe now half my age. But the guitar is what stood out here for me. It's a classic rock sound. I don't necessarily think it's the best, but again, I think it was trying to set that cosmic tone. That's what I got out of it.
Yeah.
It didn't do anything for you, right?
No, man. Especially for setting the tone, and I was trying to figure out what they were doing with the album cover. Was it supposed to be a smiley face? Was it supposed to be like, hey, we took a bunch of acid at Coachella, and this is what came out of it, and we're pretending to be hippies?
There you go.
Because I think overall this record really wants to be upbeat, and it really wants to be positive.
Right.
I also just think that at the end of the day, it doesn't really know what it is, as in the record doesn't have its own identity, other than we've got the formula for 3 songs and we've repeated 11 times. So it was really confusing. And as an opening track, I just kept going when's the record going to start? Because it just didn't do anything. And that's a big problem throughout this record, is that these big climactic things that just don't go anywhere.
Right.
I'm going to own it right now. Musicianship wise, you're right. These kids are very talented.
Yeah. They can play, man.
They can play. it just doesn't go anywhere. And I think there's a difference between playing really well and playing good music.
Yeah.
And this song for me, it just kind of sets up what a wet fart this whole record ends up being. Why don't you take us into track 2?
So we got the Cold Wind. There's a blues riff using that A chord. Now, whenever I hear songs with an A chord, I like that kind of start off that way. For some reason, I always think of that song "All Right Now" by that band Free. I never liked that song, so that was a tough song. The Cold Wind now. For me to get into because of the association with that song. I think this had more of a Zeppelin vibe than Age of Man. It's kind of, again, another classic rock song with a lot of riffs. The guitar, sound-wise, isn't so overpowering during the verses. I liked the solo. I think that to me is what stood out. It definitely wasn't an initial favorite of mine, but I think it's a formula that they were trying to work off of, which maybe that's why you sense some repetition there. What was your thoughts on the song?
I'm with you on this. The guitar work on this song is as cool as it gets on the record. Really great job. That up tempo, really kind of driving Zeppelin feel. Not quite rock and roll, but not quite as passive as like Immigrant Song. Just really just up pace and rocking. And really, you know, that to me was this song. It was a really cool feature for a guitar part. You know, lyrically, there's just nothing on this record does anything for me. But as far as just kind of, like, if this were that opening track, I really feel like this record could have gone a little further and a little deeper. If they had started here, I feel like it would have a lot more life and personality to it.
Yeah.
It feels like we hit a speed bump with the first song, we hit the gas, and in 2 or 3 tracks, that stop sign's going to just pop right up.
So this one actually engaged you more than the first track, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely. Hey, look, tracks 2, 3, 4, for me, with the exception of 11, because that song comes back again.
Yeah.
This is the best of the record. Yeah, this is the most positive I'm going to be, folks. So
right.
If you haven't had a cocktail yet, now's the time, because it gets dark in a bit. But yeah, so you mind if I take it into When the Curtain Falls?
Please do, my man. Please do.
Dude, the curtain falls. There's that sweet-ass Chuck Berry guitar solo.
Yeah.
Dude, it's on rocks.
Yeah, right?
I mean, like that guitar solo rocks. Otherwise, I mean, it's just boring as all hell. Look, we're doing that upbeat, you know, listeners at home probably hate you and me for using this cliche right now, this upbeat classic rock riff feel, you know, like it's, you know, we're right in that Zeppelin wheelhouse that they don't want to talk about.
Yep.
They throw a little Chuck Berry on it, and it's good. You know, like, the musicianship on this record isn't the problem.
Yeah.
The musicianship's great. The solos are fantastic. The sound of this kid's voice is really cool.
Yeah.
I wish there was something other than garbage coming out of it. But, like, this song, great rock feel, love that Chuck Berry guitar. What do you think?
Yeah, so it's the first single from the album. Definitely has the funky kind of blues feel. It's riffy. Again, something from the Zeppelin wheelhouse for sure. It's something to me that sounded like what Robert Plant would sing. They actually performed this on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, and I felt musically they were spot on. And whether you like the song or not, man, they got a standing ovation for it. So it showcased that they could definitely play. It's one of the more favorite tracks on this album. I definitely sense the whole Chuck Berry bluesy kind of rock feel to it. Again, I think it's part of the formula, but it's a track I didn't mind, man.
Cool.
Yeah. I'll go next. So Watching Over. So immediately I said to myself, why do I like this track?
It's the heavy song.
Watching Over?
Yeah, it's the only song that gets heavy.
Right, when he starts after the first part of the verse and it kind of picks up, you mean, right? Yeah,
well, I like that. The guitar into it's just nice and not necessarily chugging, but like it's just got a deepness to it, right? It's like, hey guys, this is our dark, heavy rock and roll track.
Cool. You know what? So I'm gonna build off of that because,
Go ahead.
and I think this is kind of how me and you digest music too. So this song and one later on, which were my favorites, and maybe a couple other spots here. For some reason, I was noticing it was connecting with my brain more, even more so than the first, than the tracks 2 and 3, The Cold Wind and When the Curtain Falls. So I said, why is that? So I researched and I looked at the chord progressions. So a lot of those ones that were hitting home, maybe with you too, build off of a minor chord. Now, minor chord, it's a little bit sadder, and I love the sound of minor chords. I think it does something to my serotonin levels. They're pleasant to my ear, even though they're sadder, which means I like probably sadder sounding songs. They're comforting. I just take to those tracks more, and I think maybe that's why we were connecting with that. And Watching Over kind of starts off with that, it has A minor, then gets into that little heavier riff. I felt another atmospheric cosmic vibe, but that was another common thread I found with some of these things that were connecting more with me. They were built off of minor chords, and maybe me and you kind of like that. Maybe it does something to our brains.
Yeah, definitely. I think you make an excellent point in mentioning the chords that they use,
Yeah.
and how kind of how it pertains to the tone of the song. And that's what I liked. I liked the tone of the song, but I really found it fucking boring. I'm sorry, folks. This record's fucking boring. It just was like I liked the atmosphere of it, right? I
Yeah.
liked the tone of it. It had like here's a plate of spaghetti with some shit on it, like
And don't put shit on your spaghetti, for the record, right?
That's right. Frank is half Italian, and if he says not to put shit on your spaghetti, you have to listen to him.
That's right.
That's right. So I misspoke earlier. The next track is Lover Lever.
Yeah.
I think this is probably the best song on the record, and that's probably why it's on here twice. I was surprised that this wasn't the first single, to be totally honest. And you know what I liked about it, but totally worked against it, is that lyrically, he's trying to do like Dio, like Sabbath Dio, and even like some of that Dio solo stuff, like Your Holy Diver. Like he's trying trying to get whimsical, and he's trying to get mystical, right? He's trying to do that double sun thing and tripping acid.
The falsetto in the voice, right?
He's trying to get all Dio. And you know what happens when people try to be Dio, Frank?
Do tell me, my man.
I'd rather be fucking listening to Dio, man. Like, I was like, oh my God. God damn it, now I just want to listen to Dio. Like, again, probably the best work on this. His lyrics are the least obnoxious. They're the most thematic. They're the most engaging. Like, you're listening to it and you're going, oh, where the fuck is he going with this? Like, definitely the least boring song on the album. I would like to have seen this as the first single. I like its placement in the record. Obviously, if we throw away Age of Man, I think if this is an EP, and I'll, I was listening to one of the interviews where they said, we were going to do an EP, but we had a couple other tracks.
Yes, I saw that same one too. Yeah.
We kind of talked about it, and the space in the studio the space and time. Sorry for you listening at home who are like, what the fuck is coming out of his mouth? The space and time was available in the recording studio, so they went ahead and did them, and they were able to add them to the album. I think if this is an EP of Cold Wind, When the Curtain Falls, Watching Over, and Lover and Lever, I think you've got a really cool 4-track EP.
You're in.
I'm buying it. I'm buying in at this point. I'm fully bought on Greta Van Fleet. These 4 songs, I feel like maybe not that like they're the greatest songs and that like they're going to change my life, but that whatever comes after this from this band is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
So it's really sad that the rest of this record happens. It sucks.
Yeah. Lover Lever, it's, I could see why Bakes maybe a second appearance on there. I like the vocals here. We get that crooning and that falsetto combination there. Great guitar and bass work here. I mean, the guitar work I really like. Again, they're working off the E chord, although I did play around with it, and I think you could also do an E minor. So I think that minor is coming back around into maybe why it's syncing with us. I think they're jamming on here as well. So yeah, I definitely like this song. It gets loud, and I could see why people like it.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, Mark. So you're not the one. I'm the one who has to review now. You're the one, right? Or at least I start with that.
I was
So,
gonna say thank you, but I'm so confused now. Go on.
there you go. So the next track is you're the one, right? That's the song I mentioned. I heard on satellite radio
Oh,
before.
okay.
I didn't care for it at the time.
Uh-huh.
I still
I don't care
don't.
for it now.
Yeah. I still don't. I thought the chords were way too simple. Starts off with the D chord, then we get the I think the G and the A. I don't have the guitar in front of me, but I thought it was way too simple with simple lyrics, and I thought they could have pushed the chorus to be a little bit more than what it became. However, um, as far as the flow of the album and from what we just heard, like putting an acoustic and a more mellow track here would be a good breakup. And that makes me moderately appreciate it. I can't say, though, this is a song I necessarily like and it's anything life changing. It has definitely a 60s kind of folk vibe to it, too. But as far as the placement goes on the album, I like that they did that after the songs we just heard. Mark, your thoughts on this song here?
Yeah, this was that stop sign for me. This was I think too slow, too fast. That is to say that we went from being in fourth or fifth gear in the car to just jamming it into first and just slowing way down. Like the school zone sign popped up, and we had to just adjust before that cop saw us. This to me was like a textbook '80s ballad that they adapted. How would Led Zeppelin, if Led Zeppelin were digging through Warrant's or Poison's trash, how would they take this '80s hair metal ballad and turn it into like a '60s kind of rock and roll ballad? It just didn't work for me. It was just boring as all get out. And like, you're good at that electric guitar, man. I don't need you pulling out this acoustic guitar and trying to be something you're not.
So you would have liked to have not seen any acoustic track here at this point in the album, right?
I think with the next track, The New Day, because it kind of carries over that acoustic feel to it,
Yeah.
and then it ramps up. I think if you had swapped those two tracks on this, if we're going track for track, if they had been, we've completely deleted Age of Man from this thing because that song is terrible, and then we put The New Day above You're the One, I think it would have worked. I just think that You're the One is just so boring, so trite. For not that his lyrics were ever like phenomenal, but for as whimsical as he tries to be, this song is so boring and generic that it just doesn't do anything. And that's just, it just kind of left me like, oh, why did you stop in the middle of this record?
Well, so go ahead.
I was just going to say that it just felt to me, like grinding from one speed right into a very slow, almost stop with this song.
Well, so with that said, so you liked New Day then better than You're the One?
I mean, I liked it better than You're the One. But that's not to say that I liked it. What I liked is, hey, look, we brought back the electric guitar for a cool solo. It starts with that kind of acoustic guitar, and it builds and it's moody. They jump into that guitar solo, and the solo is cool. Again, great instrumentation on this record.
Yeah.
Just otherwise the song's boring as fuck. Have you guys guessed how Mark feels about this album right now?
It's gonna be no surprise, right? When we get to the end, this song actually, I don't like this song. I didn't like the chord progressions. For me, I didn't think we needed another acoustic song right after You're the One. Right. The melody, the verses, they just didn't do it to me. I can't remember what I just said a second ago. If I said it started with a B chord, I was wrong. It's an F chord, and I've never been able to write anything starting with that. So it's been like a mental block for me. So that could be another reason for it too. I just wasn't digging this song. I mean, this could have been a B side or maybe even a C side. I just wasn't liking the song.
Yeah, like I said, I think for the flow of this record, if this song comes after Lover and Lever, you kind of you throw it into third, and then you get to You're the One, and then you're throwing it into second, and you're just kind of cruising. The flow of the record is entirely just jumbled. But, I mean, it's really okay because you put the record on and then you pay attention to anything else and the record's over because it's so fucking boring.
Well, then we get to Mountain of the Sun, which we get a slide riff here, and that adds some nice variety. What was your thoughts on that one?
So my notes for this song are entirely boring, and the words "we get it, you can go ooh ee ooh." I really just like. That's all this song felt like was just like 6 minutes of him going ooh ee ooh. Like he's got great pipes and he sounds awesome, but god damn it, do something with it. Like there's no substance to it. It just really felt boring. Yeah.
Maybe like this middle section of the album, I think we're just getting lost because maybe just those mid-tempo songs, maybe it's just bad placement because, like we said, if you stopped at Love or Leave Her and then had the 3 previous tracks over it, hey man, now we're talking. We got a good EP here, but it made this middle portion of the album. I definitely got lost in it too, and I think you could agree, right?
Yeah, it's definitely the middle, the end, and the beginning of this record that are the worst parts of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to digest all of it. Yeah.
I'm trying to be so positive with this record because, like, I wanna see these guys blossom into something really cool. I want to see them do something interesting. I just don't think they have the guts to do it. And I think they're going to stick in this comfort zone, which is what they do for the rest of this record. Because it's not over. Do you mind if I jump into Brave New World?
Yeah, I was just going to say, go right ahead, man.
Dude, more Dio lyrics. I really wish I was listening to Dio at this point. Do you want to just switch and talk about a Dio record? You probably don't know any Dio records. It's okay.
Not front to back, but I mean,
Yeah, that's, again, great job with imagery, with his lyrics.
Right.
But the song doesn't go anywhere, man. It just doesn't do anything.
See, I wonder again if it goes back to placement because when I heard this song, this is actually my favorite track on the album, and we were getting another minor chord to start it off, and I'm like, okay, I'm digging that. I think there's even some drop D tuning. I like the guitar work, and it was taking me like literally like a trip in the sky at nighttime. Lots of imagery here, nice melodic breakdown. I thought the chorus was rocking, but maybe after what we heard, we're kind of like, oh, I'm almost maybe even checked out, and maybe this song needed to be higher up on the track list.
Yeah, maybe it's probably the best of this back half of the record,
right?
With the exception of the second Lover Leaver, but honestly, I mean, just a lot of not going anywhere, and it's way better than the next track.
Yeah, well, okay. So, and do you mind if I start off with that, I guess?
Yeah, by all means.
So another acoustic song, and although I love acoustic music, I'm not engaged with the song at all. This song in particular, I was just waiting for it to be over. The end loses me with that chorus harmony repetition. Definitely hippie vibes here. I'm not the biggest fan. You? What say you?
I'm gonna read you exactly what I wrote.
Yeah, go ahead.
Lyrical dumpster fire and boring as fuck. No, hey, look, the chorus or one of the main lines is, "The world is only what the world is made of."
Yeah.
Yeah, easy poetry club dropout. Like, don't stab yourself with that fucking pencil. Like, dude, like, come on, hippie. Like, put some thought into it. Like, I mean, they're 22. They probably got some really good weed because people like them. They're doing some psychedelics. They're having a great time. Like, get your dad to proofread your lyrics, bro. These fucking lyrics suck. Like, they just do. And like, hey, look, as much as I'm into punk rock, as much as I think having a meaning in your songs is fucking awesome. I'm also for, lyrics as artistry and that they don't have to paint an exact picture. But when you try to get into this, this kind of goes into that, like, that fucking Fleetwood Mac dumb lyric of sings a song that sounds like she's singing. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, it's so dumb and repetitious and like just stop, dude. Like, what the fuck? Like, I had to pour myself another glass of whiskey because I honestly, like, this song is really like it's the thing. Like, this album, it's supposed to end on this, right? Like, obviously they decided to do an extended take of Lover and Leaver, and we'll get into that a little bit.
Yeah.
But this was supposed to be the finale. This was supposed to be, kind of like the homage back to the title, which, let's be honest, doesn't mean a fucking thing. They just made it up. I saw an interview. He was like, "Oh, I wrote it as part of a poem.
Yes.
I don't remember what the poem was about.
Yep.
I like that line, and it seems really cool. And like, everybody's just kind of here for a good time. Shut the fuck up!" Like, like, dude, just stop. Like, have it mean something or have it mean nothing. But like, stop with this fucking bullshit, pussy ass fucking lyrics in the middle of shit. Like, own it or don't. I just, oh my fucking God, please don't make me do any more of that record.
I think knowing you for the amount of time that I know you, and what you just said about your preference with lyrics, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think that if they're going to go ahead and anybody, Fleetwood Mac or or Greta Van Fleet, if they're going to go ahead and put something out there and have it to them be as profound, I think my man Mark wants some more details on that, right? Like, they need to explore that a little bit more. They need to expand off of what exactly that means. They just can't put it off there and then be like, well, we said it, and this is some magical lyric we have, right? You're wanting more, right?
No, I mean, I want, when you put out a lyric that you think is like so artistic and beautiful, like, it can't suck. And these lyrics suck. These are two prime examples of lyrics that literally mean nothing, but that you're projecting the weight of the world on. And you are suggesting that there is such deep richness and value to these lyrics, when clearly you look at them, there is zero value to them on the surface. And when you hear them within the song, it's clearly you making up a bullshit line to fill a part of the song and then pretending that it was grandiose. Fuck you. It's not. Like, it's just not. Like, come on, dude. Like, go back to those sweet ass Dio lyrics you were doing earlier, man. Like, it doesn't have to mean anything. So stop pretending that it does, right? Because you can't do it both. You can't be playing D&D and Call of Duty at the same time. You have to pick which one you're doing. Like, what fucking game are you playing? What song are you writing? And what does it actually mean to you? And if it's just a fantasy nothing song, let it be that. But stop applying value to things without value.
Well, we mentioned Dylan quite a bit in this episode, but I mean, what he did is he left a lot of stuff up to interpretation, right? So he gave you all this imagery, he gave you all these stories, and you might take that song as meaning something, and I may take that song as meaning something, and that I'm cool with. But there has to be a sophistication, right, that goes with it. There has to be a level of intellect that you layer this stuff with. It's hard. It's hard for sure. But like you said, you gotta, if you're gonna put something together, have it mean something.
Right. And I would challenge. Like, I'm not crazy about Dylan, right? Frank, for our listeners at home, Frank loves Dylan, and
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with that. I will challenge our listeners right now. Find a Dylan lyric as bad as that.
There you go.
You're not going to do it, because at least when he's being thoughtful, it's genuine, and you can tell that. And and when he's being kind of just goofy and stoned, you can tell. But he's not suggesting that, like, when he's goofy and stoned, that any of those lyrics mean anything other than I'm fucking stoned right now. So to me, I like I said, I challenge the listeners. You guys know how to find me: Instagram, YouTube. Apparently, Frank will tell me how much shit you've talked about me. Find a worse Bob Dylan lyric than that horse shit from Greta Van Fleet, because I really think this is a case of really talented guys who can do better but aren't.
Yeah, well, I actually adore Tom Waits and his writing even more so than Dylan, and he's another one who just, man, when he puts things together, they just hit you in such a good way. And if you want to challenge and find a Tom Waits lyric that is bad, please send those then my way. So Dylan lyrics go to Mark, and Tom Waits lyrics go to Frank. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I'd be willing to hear either one of those arguments for something worse than that. It's just. Ooh, Frank, Lover, Leaver,
Yeah,
Taker, Believer.
that's right. We get the Taker and Believer this time around.
We're not boring. See, here's the song that you liked that sounded the most like Led Zeppelin.
Right.
And we know that that's why you're listening to this record. So we put it on here twice.
Mm-hmm. We
And
extended it. We made it longer.
Yeah, we made it a little bit longer, and we added a cool radio talkie part to the back third of it so that you'd be like, oh, listen to them being deep. Yeah, and you know what? Whatever. It's like a fucking puddle, it's so deep.
I mean, I think because we like that song better than Anthem, I guess in retrospect, it's okay now to close that album with it, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean.
You're like, we heard it before, but absolutely, right?
I think, right, because really we're talking, the only difference really is that extended ending.
Yeah.
I think if this were the EP I wanted, where it's tracks 2 through 5 or 2 through 6, and Lover Leaver is the last one, it's the nail on it. I don't think you do that short version on it. I think you put this one.
Yeah.
I think you put that extended ending on there. You show people that there is a little more depth to you. And then I'd really be interested to see what the next record sounds like. At this point, I'm just going, oh man, Spotify must have just picked another track from this song before it starts shuffling other stuff for me. Oh no, this is just the same song again. Because literally what happened is that I listened to the record through.
Yeah.
This came on, and I went, oh, I guess Spotify is shuffling. Because, sometimes it'll shuffle back to that record. And then what happened was this song finished, and I was like, oh, it's got an extended ending. That's pretty cool. Okay, that's interesting. And then it shuffled back to the first version of it.
Yeah.
So I literally heard the song 3 times.
3 times.
Within an hour, and I was like, oh, my God, stop it.
That's funny, man.
Yeah.
That's funny. So, all right. Yes, they sound like Zeppelin. They're young, and this is also their first album. What's intriguing about them, not only they're playing with Metallica during the summer, I believe in Barcelona and some other countries. Not
Hope
in
they forget them there. I mean,
not in the U.S.
Hey, that's cool. Hey, look, that's cool.
I'm interested to see where they go next. Like, I think if they're 5 albums in, right, and they're still sounding so much like Zeppelin, I think we have a problem, right? But I think of now, I don't think the Zeppelin influence is wrong, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it, I should say. But
there's nothing wrong with being influenced by Zeppelin.
No.
I think it's the question is how intentional is their sound? How much like Zeppelin are they trying to be, and how much is this them genuinely trying to write music?
Yeah.
I think it's going to be very difficult for them over the next few years to suggest that they can keep writing this style of music,
right,
and not say that they're just lining up Zeppelin albums and trying to recreate them.
Yeah.
So, the fact that there's already been interviews and articles written about how the next album is going to be so much different. I'm curious where that goes. I'm curious what it's going to do to the sound, to their fan base. I'm curious. I think, last week for those of us who listen to know that we talked about concerts and going to shows, but the week before, you had me listen to Superdrag's Head Trip in every key.
Yes.
And that was a really interesting example of a band who had a smash hit album with a #1 song on it that then got a bunch of money to go back in the studio and do what they want.
Right.
I'm interested to see what these guys will do with that opportunity. I don't think that there's a #1 hit on this record. I'll be honest with you. I listened to this record right up until the point of you and I starting to record. And it's almost completely out of my brain. Like none of it's memorable. I can't tell if my memories of their songs are their songs or if they're Zeppelin songs. And it's definitely a bad thing. I'm not a huge Led Zeppelin fan. I appreciate them. I certainly went through a Led Zeppelin phase where I thought they were the coolest thing ever.
Right.
And then I kind of took a grain of salt and went, this sounds a lot like some blues records. But I'm really interested to see where this next record will go. I'll definitely listen to it.
Yeah.
I think we're kind of at the part of the show where you and I would mention if we would buy this record or not.
Yeah.
For those of you, spoiler alert, I'm not. I think at that point I don't have to say it anymore, right?
Yeah, I think everyone got the picture, my
Everyone
man.
knows that I hate this. Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm definitely not buying this record, but I'm interested to see where they go from this, because it's clear to me, based on the interviews that they've done, and the way they've kind of avoided really talking about the Zeppelin thing. I think that they resent it at this point. I think it's a flag being, or a bar
Yeah.
being raised above their head, and they feel it is absolutely necessary to clear it, and doing something more grandiose. So it's really going to be interesting to see how they react to it and how they come back. I think the musicianship on this record can't be understated. The guitar solos are phenomenal.
Yeah.
The rhythm section's really on point. The drums sound great. The bass sounds great. There's not really any moments where you kind of hear them lack. There's a few parts where the drums and bass are featured that are solid.
Yeah.
Some really nice rhythm section work there. I just think overall as a whole, the record is just kind of sleepy and boring. And like, hey, Dad found a new record. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. Like this thing does nothing for me. How about you, Frank? What's your looking back at the whole thing? How do you see this thing?
Sure. And you have to, I think with a band like this, especially with the heat they're taking and with the Led Zeppelin comparisons, you have to look at the whole thing. I just wish they'd come out and be like, listen, Zeppelin's our biggest influence, and this is how we're going to start. We may not end here, but this is kind of how we're going to start. In many interviews, and one comes to mind too with Nikki Sixx, I guess it was the Sixth Sense. That's the show, and he's interviewing the guitarist, and he's talking about Jeff Beck, he's talking about Eric Clapton and Cream stuff, and he goes, well, Jimmy Page has to be a big influence on you. He's like, oh yeah, Page for sure. And then that was the end of it. Just come out and say it. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong. Address it.
Look at both of those record store interviews that I watched. At no point did anyone even go near a Led Zeppelin record.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
they're trying to do everything not to go buy them.
I mean, do you have them all already? Say that.
Yeah.
There's just a big disconnect from like being honest about what this thing is.
Right.
And I think that's what, like, not what bothers me about them. Like, I could give a fuck. Look, they're four really good looking 20-something-year-olds. They're going to get way more laid than I ever did. That's fine. Like, they deserve it. They're the live footage that they're clearly rocking the house and they're having a great time.
Yeah.
People are digging it. And like, at the end of the day, that's what matters, is like, are people enjoying it? Yes, you and I are going to go on the internet and just tell you how fucking boring it is. but that's all right. And that's their right to enjoy it. I've totally stolen your moment to talk about.
It's okay, man.
The record is. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No worries. You had good stuff to say. So I'm kind of rooting for these guys. I thought they were humble dudes. I really liked that they come from that old school musical background. I'm more engaged on where they're going to go as opposed to where they've been already and what like this current album is about. So would I purchase it? Well, I mean, I wouldn't say I would go out of my way to purchase it. I think if you shortened it to the EP like we said we would, yeah, you have my dollars all day. I would see them live, though, just because, again, the musicianship I felt was on par. The guitars, I felt the guitar work was great. The tones of the guitar was great. Vocally, he's got a great range. So again, it's almost of a gray area for me, and I don't mean just to kind of be neutral with a lot of these things, but I mean that's kind of how I feel. The record had me, then it lost me with that middle section, it kind of brought me back again. Yeah, I would rather see them live than buy the record, and I'm even more intrigued about what the next album is going to bring. So that's kind of my synopsis at the end of the day.
I think that's fair enough, and that's I think what people are going to find as they listen to the podcast is that I'm right.
Yes, there you go.
Wrong.
Yes.
No. Look, I think we kind of ended on similar notes here. We're both really interested to see what the next Greta Van Fleet album is going to be. Can we I want to hit pause, and I want to talk about the name.
Sure.
Did you do any research into what Greta Van Fleet means?
I believe they said it was a family friend right? This lady who they knew in town from Michigan. Is am I right on that, or am I mixing that up with another story? Because I have so
Oh,
much going into
yeah.
my head.
I should preface, I don't know what that name means.
Oh,
Frank, do you know what that name means? Because I've got to be honest with you, it's a terrible name.
you don't like it, huh?
Oh, it's terrible. Look, it's too many syllables. B, it starts with Greta, right? And there's no women in the band. Um,
So
you
to
know,
clarify, Greta Van Fleet is named after a real person. 87-year-old Gretna Van Fleet is from the band's hometown. It's one of the group's early drummers. Remember his grandfather telling him a story about how he had to go out to cut wood for Gretna Van Fleet, and they thought it sounded like a good band name. So there you
oh, they're wrong. It's a terrible name. It's a bad name. I guarantee you, like, that kid's grandfather lost his virginity to her or something. And like they always heard how hot she was. It's not a good name, and it kind of, to me, and this is based solely on what you just said.
Yeah.
Speaks to the vapidness of this band, like the lyrical, just like lack of substance.
Right.
Ugh. You know, how many bands have you, like, great bands that you've heard of? And not that like a name means a ton of things for bands, but like great bands, and you hear like the list of things that they wanted to call themselves first, and you're like, oh my God, like what? And like, this is one of those, like, you know, if you were writing a script, you'd be like, so what do we call this monster? I just call it Greta Van Fleet until we can think of something better. Like, it's a placeholder name. Like,
I did think it was something from a novel before I did find out what it actually was. So
yeah, and I would have bought that. I would have bought, like, oh, it was from a novel or something. But like,
they kind of lost you with the band name too, huh?
yeah, I mean, like, it started, like, you know, kind of the deck stacked against it with like this weird, boring name of, like, you know, was it a Van Halen reference? Was it a Fleetwood Mac reference? Right?
I hope it wasn't Fleetwood Mac.
Right, but you know, when you look at the way people puzzle things together, people who are doing, you know, not necessarily a tribute sound, but happen to sound a lot like things, and like, you know, people saying like, well, I want to pull from my influences. I want to put, you know, this piece here that's of my influence, so that I always generate my energy from that. It's one of those things. Well, there's the Van, so maybe Van Halen or maybe Van Morrison, right?
Right.
And then Fleet, you know, like, to me, I just go right to Fleetwood Mac. But like, so there's this idea of like, well, what's this name mean? It's so big, it's so cumbersome as a name. To me, it kind of started off with this, like, get ready, we're pretentious. I mean, maybe it's just me. I think, you know, like I said, I'm interested to see where it goes.
Yeah.
I can't wait for this band to break up and for two other bands to come out of it, and one of those bands to be really dope. Because I feel like that's the realistic plan for this. We'll get two more records. They'll break up. The singer and the guitar player or the twins will grow to resent each other, and do separate things. And
That's
then, like, the
interesting.
bass player and the drummer will join a really cool band.
That is interesting. Wow. Well, let's see if Mark can predict the future. Let's see if that happens, right?
Yeah. Also play 7, 69, 4, 12, and 82. In the lottery, you have to share it with me.
There you go. And you mentioned something too, real quick. And I know this is another episode, right? But I'm assuming you don't like Fleetwood Mac, right?
You know, see, I'm really torn. You know, I've talked about the 3 tapes in my mom's car when we drove down, right? And Rumors was one of them.
Yeah.
I've certainly listened to my share of Fleetwood Mac. I think the problem with Fleetwood Mac is once you lay it out and really try to get into it, and you get past the cocaine and you get past, you know, the kind of whimsical white witch aesthetic, there's nothing left. You know, Rumors works as an album because it's a record of you know, 4 or 5 people in a band that are all fucking each other, and and how that goes sideways. And for that record works. I don't love it, but like, you can't deny the functionality of that record. You know, the songs are catchy. They feel genuine because it's, you know, it's heartbreak and lost lovers. There are some just trash lyrics in it, though.
Yeah.
And then you look at their other records and you go, yeah, that was a one-off. They got really lucky and fucked each other, and rumors happened, and the rest of their discography is just boring as snot. Like the album that comes after that, Tusk,
Right.
is 900% cocaine.
Yeah.
Just listen to that record. It is absolute horseshit. It's why you don't give bands a lot of money after they have a hit record. Let them do whatever they want. Stevie Nicks and
Lindsey Buckingham
and Lindsey Buckingham work really well together as long as they're fighting with each other. But when it comes to like just genuinely trying to do something and trying to be creative, that band's not good, and we need to stop giving them all this credit because they don't deserve it.
Yeah, and I think this is going to eventually be an episode, but just real quick before we get into what we're going to do next. So my wife, as you know, loves Stevie Nicks, but she was never the biggest Fleetwood Mac fan. And, on TV, if there was, there's been like Stevie Nicks concerts on, and I must say they're very entertaining. I think that when she's placed with the other people in Fleetwood Mac, with Lindsey Buckingham and I think Christine McVie is the other name, a complete snoo fest. I think Buckingham he puts
and Ronald McDonald's on the drums, right?
Right, yeah.
Fleetwood Mac is Ronald McDonald.
Right, yeah. Buckingham, yeah, I like that. Buckingham puts me absolutely to sleep. I think they made elevator music. They made easy listening tunes. The songs sung by Christine.
It's adult contemporary.
Adult contemporary, and they tried to. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Those adults are dying.
Yeah. Listen to it. And Stevie's an honorary heartbreaker, right? Because of the work she did with Tom Petty. So it's like, I give her cred for that. I really do. But man, like, you mean to tell me you're going to do these horrible pop singles and then put her in the background for then Buckingham and McVie to sing? I don't know, man. Like, I couldn't get into that. And I think there was an overrated. I think Stevie should have just been solo from the beginning. So there you go.
I think her best work is the Tom Petty work. And I think her best work is the Tom Petty work because Tom Petty wrote her lyrics. She's a fantastic singer. She's got a great voice. Yeah. But that's it. That's like saying, like, all my favorite albums, they play a Les Paul because Les Paul guitars sound the best. Yeah. She's a musical instrument. She is not the best creator. She is not a great right. And I'm sure she's a singer. Great performer. I believe that, yeah. But when it comes to creating and being an artist and doing those things, her work has always been just kind of meh, and the people writing for her have always shined. And that's why, the Heartbreakers, she's an honorary member of the Heartbreakers because they wouldn't let her in. They say it's because she's a girl. I think it's because she contributed nothing.
Well, it's funny too because Mike Campbell of the Heartbreakers is now part of Fleetwood Mac, which is pretty interesting.
So check, brother.
Yeah, so there's that intertwined, between Fleetwood Mac and the Heartbreakers.
The city of Gainesville needs that taxable income.
Nice.
So Mike, go do those, 12 shows a year, right? I don't know how many shows they're doing as Fleetwood Mac these days.
Maybe 13, maybe.
13, take that money, bro, put it back into Gainesville. Florida needs it,
There you go.
What else is he going to do? He's a great producer. He's doing stuff. Fuck yeah, bro. Go ahead and, like, if you don't care about playing that boring music, go for it.
Well, if it's funny that they're at their ages and they kicked out Lindsey Buckingham. And real quick before we get into then again the next episode, if you could find, I thought it was available once on Spotify, but I couldn't find it. But there was a version of "Stop Dragging My Heart Around" where it's Tom Petty doing both. I think it's like a B-side. So it's no Stevie Nicks, it's just Tom Petty. Man, that's a tune. It really, really is a good tune. And then for your comedic pleasure, you could check out Weird Al's "Stop Dragging My Car Around." So
I was hoping there was a Weird Al reference.
Of course, there's always going to be a Weird Al reference. All right. So you want to talk about what we're going to do next week, Mark?
Yeah, we're hitting the old time machine.
Yes.
The year 1965.
Yep.
I'm a big Animals fan. I think the Animals, most people know them for House of the Rising Sun, as they should. fantastic song. But there's some real depth to their records. It's really interesting. I'm going to ask you to listen to the U.S. release. So if we have any international listeners who say that, it was a different record in
Sure.
the UK in 1965, they are correct. Frank and I are going to listen to the 1965 U.S. release. Not short of its hits. I mean, We Got to Get Out of This Place, Bring It On Home to Me, and Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood. I have finished that second glass of whiskey, if you're wondering why I'm talking funny.
Nice.
But really great record here. It's kind of a collection of some singles and some things they had recorded. And they, the record companies, as they will, felt that this was the best thing for them to release in 1965. It was really an interesting era, the mid-'60s. There was a lot of singles being recorded as opposed to full albums. And then what would happen is that then the albums would be compiled. And this is kind of a victim of that. But
Yeah.
I think it really works. 1965's Animal Tracks, really great record. There's some really, I think you'll probably laugh at the Bo Diddley song. But there's some really great soulful R&B stuff. And a lot of people like to forget that, the Rolling Stones, the Animals, there's a big British segment of rock and roll that was obsessed with American R&B.
Yeah.
And this is a great example of that. And I want you to listen to this record, Frank, because I feel like a lot of that big bluesiness comes across, man, 2 glasses of whiskey.
Love it.
It really comes across in a meaningful, not necessarily meaning, but in a genuine way. They really care for the music they're playing, and they do a great job doing it. The couple hits on it that you're just going to absolutely, if you haven't heard these versions of those songs, I think you'll absolutely adore them. And I think it's an album that you're going to find easily makes a great heavy rotation record. You can just throw this in and listen to it. It's got the depth when you want it. It's also got that easy listening aesthetic to it when you just need something that you can put on without having to think too hard about it. This album really does a lot in that aspect. What do you got for me, buddy?
Cool, man. Well, I'm excited to check that out for sure. What I have for you, also from the year 1965, this is from my first musical idol. And my first musical idol was Dion DiMucci from Dion the Belmonts. In 2017, he released a lost album called Kicking Child. This is a lost album due to, at his time in Columbia Records, and the frustrations that surrounded it. He basically forgot about this album. It's a complete departure of what he was doing in the late 50s and early 60s with those doo-wop style songs. I'm talking Run Around Sue, The Wanderer.
Great stuff.
Teenager in Love, absolutely. One of the real first guys to cement these types of songs. This album showcases kind of Bob Dylan style songs, including, there's actually 3 Dylan covers, including It's All Over Now, Baby. It's All Over Now, Baby Blue. Excuse me. So there's that style here on it, but we have to be honest, Dion has a way better voice and a richer sounding voice than Dylan. So they come across, it comes across a completely different feel. So again, there's a lot of frustration surrounding this album. He was also dealing with a lot of grief over the loss of his friends, Buddy Holly, Big Bopper, and Richie Valens, because he was supposed to be on that plane, and there was a bet that he won that then he was able to take another means of transportation, obviously not the plane. So that had a huge effect on him. So you're
didn't he lose that bet?
Yeah, he lost the bet.
Yeah. He had to, if you watch La Bamba,
yes,
listeners at home, he's the one who has to stay on the bus without any heat.
Yes.
And Richie Valens dies in his place.
Right.
Richie Valens was terrified to fly.
Yeah, Richie Valens was totally tired of flying. When I said he won, Dion DiMucci, that is.
I guess he did.
Yeah, I guess he did. Yeah, but you're right. He did lose the bet. So a lot of that had an effect on him in this record. I absolutely love it. I bought the vinyl when it came out, so I do own this record. And I think it's great, and I really can't wait to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, that should be really interesting. You make an interesting point about Dylan's voice versus Dion's, right? Dion is almost known for like silk, right? Just that voice. But Dylan is known for that voice that carries these words that are difficult to hear that are important, and it's his voice that sells
Yeah.
some of the almost ramblingness of it. It's going to be. I'm really interested to see what he does with it, because we're taking two very different dynamics and putting them in one. I'm really happy you picked this record. I'm looking forward to checking this out, because I have not, much like Greta Van Fleet, heard anything about it.
Cool, man. Yeah, I'm really stoked for you to listen to it. Even on the album, on the back, it even has a little excerpt by Dylan saying how Dion's voice is just great. So it kind of even makes his song sound better. And Bob has always made reference that other people sing his songs better. So it's, I think you're going to enjoy it, man. Yeah. Anything else you have to say, Mark?
No, I'd really like it if you've listened to this and
Yes.
I haven't totally pissed you off. Please rate and review us where possible.
Yes.
And if you don't like it, tell one of your friends that you're only friends with because you work together or something. But make them listen to me. Don't rate us really low. Just tell somebody you don't like to listen to the podcast.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for nothing else, you got to hear from Mark. You could tune me out. I don't care, people, but listen, you got to hear Mark. And I first to admit he's way more entertaining than myself, but we enjoy this thoroughly. We hope you guys have enjoyed this. Continue to check us out wherever you listen to podcasts. You're on Instagram. Please give us a follow. Drop us a line. We will take suggestions. Again, these episodes are on YouTube as well. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next time.
Have a good night, guys, or day, or lunch. If you're listening to this during lunch.
Yes, have a good lunch.
Yeah, have a good lunch. I think maybe don't put the jalapenos on it, though.
Yeah. And for those brunch fans out there, make sure you have a good brunch too.
Ooh, yeah, brunch is good. Frank, you like a good mimosa?
Well, I'm a fan.
You're a fan of the mimosa. Are you OJ heavy or are you champagne heavy?
I'm actually OJ.
OJ heavy?
Yeah, OJ heavy.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really drink mimosas. I was just kind of curious.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you again.
All right, buddy. Have a good night.
Peace.
Peace.